Now, if there is a concern with Pittsburgh, Dirk, let's put it out here. You can't expect Chris Boswell to kick 6 field goals in the playoffs and win the game for you.
We're going to just focus on the top 5 this week. You know why? Because there's been some significant movement with the loss of Kansas City. There's now a new champ or new sheriff in town. Well, and that's even across the board. But we share some of those. Let's go through what the NFL.com has. Right now, NFL.com has the Lions number 1 overall, and then coming in number 2, Josh Allen and the Bills going into their bye week, sneak into that second spot. Kansas City now falls all the way to 3, and then number 4, Mike, the Eagles make their way. And then after that, they have Pittsburgh. Who else? No. The Packers sitting at number 5. Now,
well, that's interesting.
I have some pretty big disagreements with some of this. And first, starting with, okay, I can go with the first 2, maybe. However, I don't agree with the second one. I think you got to go number 1. You go with the Lions, who, hands down, far and away, you cannot have a serious power rankings at this point and not have the Lions at number 1. Number 2, though, how is Pittsburgh not in the top 5 in that? How are they number 6?
It's baffling that they lose or they beat Baltimore and don't end up in the top 5. That's bizarre.
I mean, they're playing better football than anybody. They have one of the best, if not the best, defense right now, and that's pretty hard to argue. I mean, outside of that, maybe Denver, maybe. But I mean, at some times they've been.
Denver has the best defense if they played the NFC South every time.
Wow, that's fair. But then after that, like to put Buffalo, I don't think Buffalo beats Pittsburgh in a head-to-head matchup. I just don't. I think that they match up too well against that team. And I know power rankings are subjective and whatnot, but I think Pittsburgh has to be your number 2 team. I would even go Buffalo number 3 or Kansas City sharing number 3 with Buffalo. I think that's kind of one of those coin tosses. I know that they just won, but it's a one-loss team. They're the reigning Super Bowl champs. At some point, they were going to lose, and that's not a bad team to lose to.
Yeah.
I don't think that Buffalo beats them postseason. Sorry, I love Josh, but I don't.
Yeah, I think Nance and Romo got a little bit too into the old narrative of, these teams... Jim, these teams are going to see each other again. I know it's happening. I mean, yes, historically, we've seen them play each other in the playoffs a bunch, and it's often determined the route to the Super Bowl, albeit not always, because the year that one of the greatest games ever was played, the Chiefs turned around and lost to the Bengals in the next round. So when they dove into that narrative, all my, thoughts went to neglecting how good the NFC or the AFC North is this year.
Oh, so good.
And
Browns are great.
Oh yes, the Browns, great team. So here's the deal. Kansas City had the unbeaten start, but it was probably the least convincing unbeaten start since that year the Titans were like 12-0 or 13-0.
But for the refs, but for a foot. But for, I mean, it even happened last week. They didn't even review that. We haven't even talked about that. They didn't review a clearly uncatchable or ball that was not caught. That should have been an incomplete pass, 4th down now, and 4th down and 13.
That was insane. So here's the thing. Kansas City, yes, they were undefeated, but they were also underdogs going into Buffalo, so we were expecting the Bills to win that game, technically. Buffalo took care of business. It was a good win. If there is a concern with Buffalo, and it's always been the case, Dirk, it's that they suffered some really bad injuries on defense early in the season, guys out for the year. Still feel like unless the playing field gets evened, once it gets to postseason football, that can come back to haunt Buffalo.
Imagine how much better they'd be if Milano was still around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's the guy I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I love the Bills. I think that it would be a great story, but I'm not 100% convinced. I'm with you. Pittsburgh over Baltimore, to me, was the more impressive win.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a concern with Pittsburgh, Dirk, let's put it out here. You can't expect Chris Boswell to kick 6 field goals in the playoffs and win the game for you.
Or how about, I don't know, let's talk about Russell Wilson's touchdown.
That's exactly what we're
sorry, I should say, should have been touchdown, but just floated interception into the end zone.
Yeah, if there are real concerns with Pittsburgh, it's that Russ looked like the Russ of the last 2 years.
He was cooking.
Against Baltimore,
He was cooking.
So here's the thing with power rankings right now, Dirk, and this is where I fall in it. The Lions absolutely right now are playing the best football.
Yeah.
Are power rankings necessarily reflective of the most likely teams to win the Super Bowl? I don't think so. Because obviously it would be crazy to put Baltimore into the top 5 having lost and now having 4 losses. But do I still think the Ravens are a big threat to win the Super Bowl? I still do. I think they're a team designed to go on the road and win. Their secondary raising some concerns.
Yeah.
The biggest riser to me in the power rankings that could go high in the rankings and also really have the makings of a potential Super Bowl winner right now is Philly. Not just a team with talent all over the place, a team playing better football on the defensive side of the ball, but unlike most of these teams, also a team with recent Super Bowl experience. And the Eagles definitely have the capacity to get back there. This time, Saquon Barkley, potential difference maker.
Well, and we do a model every week, and the model actually, and I agree with this, which is kind of bizarre, but the model has someone that we haven't even talked about in the top 5, and it's not Philly. Now, Philly's number 4 in the NFL.com power rankings. What we have at the number 5 spot after Kansas City is the Chargers, Mike. Now, they are a sneaky team that has had great defensive play, kind of mid offensive play, but efficient, right? However, they have had huge wins, and I think that's going to get vindicated this weekend when the Chargers beat the Ravens.
I mean, if the Chargers beat the Ravens, it shakes a lot up. Obviously, the Harbaugh Bowl is a great matchup. I think the concern with the Chargers, and maybe it's starting to come together, but you just look at the offensive skill positions, and you're kind of like, all right,
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter. They've only dropped 2 games, and they haven't been bad losses either.
Not yet. Well, they've got 3. 7-3.
Yeah.
But they still, like, when it gets to the postseason and you're playing the best of the best, that's when it starts to matter a little bit more.
Sure.
I think, for the Chargers, their biggest game probably remaining on the season is going to be when Denver comes out to L.A. If they beat the Broncos and hold them off.
Over Kansas City?
Yeah, because for the Chargers, they've got to get through Denver. If they lose that game, the Broncos have a chance at overtaking them in the division.
But if they beat Kansas City, well, I guess it depends.
Yeah, I think that Broncos game is a bigger game for them than the Kansas City game because it has real implications, not just for the playoffs and their seeding with Denver, but also their confidence. If they sweep the Broncos, they're definitely secure their places at the very least the number 2 team in the division. And then that Chiefs game becomes a bigger thing. But I think that Broncos game that's on the horizon is the one that really is going to have a huge bearing on what direction the Chargers go.